Hi there, welcome to Scratch Programming 101. In this tutorial, we're going to teach you how to program a simple Pong game using Scratch programming. If you have not gone through the basics of Scratch, please check out our previous videos on the basics of Scratch. Alright, so let's get straight into it. First, we need to remove the cat picture over here. We can do this by right-clicking it and click on the delete button. Next, we need to draw the bars that we'll be using to play the game with. We can do this by creating a new sprite with the paint the new sprite icon over here. Once you click on it, you will see a paintbrush screen over here. Let's use the line tool to draw a line. You realize that the line is pretty thin and it's not like the Pong bars that you are used to seeing. So let's clear this off. We can actually increase the width of the line using this line width scroller over here at the bottom. So let's increase the width of the line and draw our new line. You also realize that it's pretty difficult to get the line perfectly straight. A simple trick would be to press and hold the shift button, and you realize that the line will become a perfectly straight line. So we have our first line, and what we need to do, we need to make it move up and down when we press the control buttons. We can do this by going to Scripts, Events, and using the when a specific key is pressed, we can make it move up and down. So we want the bar to move up when the up key is pressed and down when the down key is pressed. So let's change this to up arrow. We will need to make it move, so we will go to Motion and change the Y-axis by 10. So let's try it out. Okay, it works. Our bar is moving up. We'll need to duplicate the event, change it to the down arrow, and change the y-axis by -10 so that it moves downwards. Let's try it out. Great! Our bar is moving perfectly fine. But if you notice, the bar tends to go out of the screen, and we don't want that to happen when we are playing the game. So what we can do, we can go to Motion and put in an if on edge bounce, so that the line will not go out of screen. But you realize that when it hits the edge of the screen, it gets tilted. This happens sometimes, and to fix this, all you need to do is to add in another control, which is set rotation style left to right. Okay, there you go. So let's duplicate this and place it for the down arrow as well. Okay, so now our line is constrained within the screen. Now we have a moving line, and we would like to have the line placed in a specific position at the start of the game. We can do this by using the Go to X and Y axis option in the Motion menu. You realize that when you move the line on the screen, the X and Y values change accordingly. So, when we want to start the game, we will always click the flag button. So what happens when we click the flag button? We want the line to be at this specific position on screen, which is relative to this X and Y axis. So let's try it out. We can move the line up and down, but whenever we start the game by clicking the flag button, the line goes back to the original position. Great! Now we have our first line for the second player. We'll need another line for the first player who will be controlling the left side of the screen. We can easily duplicate the entire sprite by doing a right click on the sprite and clicking duplicate. we'll see that there is a second line that appears, and we need to position it. All we need to do now is to change the control keys that will be pressed when the player is playing the game. Of course, we don't want two players to be pressing on the same keys at the same time, so let's just change the player 1 keys to W and S, which are common keys used by many games around the world. Okay, let's test it out. W and S. Great. The last thing we need to do is to set the starting position of the bar for player 1. So all we need to do is to grab the go to X and Y axis and remove the previous go to X and Y axis. Let's test it out. Both bars are moving fine. They don't go out of screen. And when the start button is pressed, they get set back to their original position. Great! Our next step would be to draw the ball. Again, we will use the Create a New Sprite button. We can choose the ellipse icon. We will choose the red color, and to make sure that the circle will be filled with the red when we draw the circle, we'll just need to click on this button over here. Another thing that we might want to check is to reduce the line width, as a big circle may cause problems when we're playing the game a little while later. Okay, so let's draw the circle. You just draw a little circle over here, and you realize that sometimes the circle gets pulled into an oval shape. Similar to the line, if you hold on to the Shift button, it will always give you a perfect circle. We don't want the ball to be too big, as this might cause problems when we're playing the game later on. So what we can do, let's clear this off. We can use the zoom button to zoom in and draw a circle which is slightly smaller than a 2x2 square on screen. The next step that you might want to do is to set the center of the circle. This will ensure that there will be no issues when we're playing the game later on. Right, so now we have our circle. Let's zoom back out. We have our red circle, which is our ball. We need to make the ball start moving when we start the game. So we can do that by going to Scripts. Under Events, let's start off with a green flag. When the green flag is clicked, we want the ball to start moving and not stop. So we can do this by going to Control and dragging in a forever loop. In this forever loop, we can put in a motion of moving 10 steps. Let's try it out. Okay, our ball moves, but it's moving a little too fast. So let's try to reduce these steps to 5. Okay, that's a pretty good speed for a Pong game. Next, we need the ball to be able to be reset to the center every time we start the game. We can do this by adding in a go to X and Y position. So, when the start flag is clicked, we want the ball to start off in the middle of the screen, which will always be 0, 0. Let's try it out. Great! Our ball is starting in the middle of the screen and it's moving. But it's pretty much moving in a straight line, which is unlike a Pong game. So we need to turn the ball in a certain direction. Let's put in a point in direction of 45 degrees. Great! Our ball is moving in a 45 direction, but it's not bouncing off the walls as a ball should be doing. So we need to add in another control, which is if on edge bounce, into the forever loop. And once we add that in, our ball is behaving more like a pong ball. The next step would be to make the ball bounce off the black bars. And to do this, we're going to use colors as a sensing tool in the Scratch programming. So the logic would be, if the ball touches any of the bars, it will need to bounce off them. Let's go to Control and add in a if loop. To sense colors, we can use the Sensing menu and drag in a touching color block. Do remember to check that the hole in the if-then loop is highlighted when you're moving the block over it. This will ensure that it fits in nicely. And to choose the right color, just click on the color box and select the color on screen. So we want the ball to bounce whenever it's touching something black, which in this case will be our two bars. We can do this by adding a motion of it turning 90 degrees. Let's try it out. Great! It's behaving more and more like a Pong game. The next thing that we need to do will be to keep track of the points. For this, we will need some variables in the system to keep track of the points. We can do this by going to Data and making a variable. We will call this player1. We can leave it for all sprites. And we'll make another variable for player2. You'll notice that the two variables will now appear on screen. Let's just drag them into position. So player 1 will be the player on the left, player 2 will be the player on the right. Next, the system would need to know how to score points for each of these players. We're going to use color sensing again to enable the program to detect the points. For this, we will need to go to the stage, click on the Backdrops tab, and start drawing some rectangles. We'll be using blue for the left side of the screen and red for the right side of the screen. So once you've selected the color, you can start drawing the rectangle, and it's best to start drawing from outside of the screen so that it covers the entire height of the screen. So we're going to use blue for the left and red for the right. We're also going to draw a gray bar on the top of the screen to act as a scoreboard. And of course, by doing so, we will need to set the ball to bounce off the gray portion of the scoreboard as well. So let's go back to the ball sprite, going to scripts. We will need to add another if loop, where the ball will need to sense that it's touching the gray color. So let's just pick the gray color. And when it's touching the gray color, we will need to rotate it by 90 degrees. Let's try it out. Okay, so now our ball is bouncing off the scoreboard as well as the bars. You might also realize that the distance from the blue and the red for the two bars are slightly different. So you might want to just readjust the position of the sprite and set the X and Y axis again. We can throw the original one away and put in the new one. So when the green flag is clicked, they will start off at pretty much the same distance from their red and blue bars. Next, we'll need to get the program to add 1 point to player 1 whenever the ball touches the red bar on the right. To do this, we'll need to go to our ball sprite. Under the scripts, we will need to add an if loop. And again, using in the sensing menu, when it touches the color red, let's pick red, we want it to add 1 point to player 1. So we can change the player 1 by 1. Let's try. Okay, you realize that the ball continued moving through the red bar and we got lots of points. We don't want that to happen. We only want 1 point every time the red ball hits the red bar once. And to do this, we can add in a wait 1 second from the control. Let's try it out. Alright, now every time our ball hits the red line, it pauses for 1 second. And after this 1 second, we need the ball to be reset to the center of the screen. So let's go to motion and bring in a go to X and Y, set it to 0, 0, which is the center of the screen. Let's try it out. It hits and it resets to the center. That's great. But you also realize that the player 1 points have not been starting from 0. So every time we start the game, we will need the points for player 1 and player 2 to reset to 0. We can do this by going to the data, setting player 1 to 0 when the green flag is ticked. We'll need to set the player 2 to 0 as well. Let's try it out. Alright, the player 1 starts from 0 every time our green flag is clicked. Now that we have the scoring mechanism for player 1, we will need the same scoring mechanism for player 2. So all we need to do is to duplicate this portion of the loop for player 2. In player 2's case, we want his points to increase by 1 every time it touches the blue. So we'll need to change this to blue, and when it touches the blue, it will add player 2's points by 1. Everything else remains the same. Let's try it out. So let's see if player 2 gets a point. Yes, he does. We've almost completed our game. The last step would be to tell the program how to end the game. Let's set it so that the first player who gets 5 points will win the game. In this case, the ball should only be moving until player 1 or player 2 gets a total of 5 points. In this case, instead of moving forever, the ball should be only moving until player 1 or player 2 gets 5 points. So under controls, we would put in a repeat until, and we need the ball to keep moving until either player 1 or player 2 gets 5 points. To do this, we will need to go to the operators menu and put in a OR block. So it will repeat until player 1 gets 5 points or player 2 gets 5 points. And to do this, we'll need another operator from the operators block, which is the equal sign. So we will do this until player 1, variable player 1 from the data, gets 5 points, or variable player 2 from the data gets 5 points. Now we can just drag the entire chunk of code that we have in the forever loop and stick it into the repeat until loop. After doing so, we don't need this forever loop anymore. We can get rid of it and replace it with the repeat until loop. So once any player gets 5 points, we want the ball to announce the winner, which would be the chunk of coding below this. But first we will need to know who the winner is. We can do this by going to controls. Let's use an if then else loop. We will go to operators, put in an equals, and check. If player 1 is 5, we will know that player 1 has won the game. And we will want the ball to say player 1 wins. So let's go to looks. Let's put in a say for the ball to say player 1 wins. And because of the repeat until loop above, we do not need to check whether player 2 has won. because if either player 1 or player 2 has gotten 5 points, and it is not player 1 who has gotten 5 points, obviously it will be player 2 who has gotten 5 points. So we can just duplicate this and tell the system to say player 2 wins. Let's try it out. Let's give player 1 5 points. Four and 5. Great, the ball says player 1 wins. Let's try it with player 2 now. That's 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, and 5 points. And the ball says player 2 wins. It is also good programming practice to tell the program to stop once everything has been completed. We can do this by going to Controls and putting in a Stop All link. But we don't need to stop everything. We only need to stop this script so that the bars can continue moving. And there you have it, your first Pong game from Scratch Programming. Thank you for watching, and remember to check out our other tutorials as well as our social media channels for more awesome Scratch programming.